show. I'm Maitreyi Sitharaman. With almost 7 out of 10 of us here in Europe living in towns and cities, this week Real Economy is exploring the economics of urban integration. What do I mean by that? Well, we'll head to Barcelona, Spain to see how affordable housing can help the most vulnerable in our urban jungles. We'll ask the Eurocity's president how she as a mayor tackles challenges on the ground like transport, and look at how newcomers, both legal and asylum seekers, put pressure on our infrastructure and growth in Vantaa in Finland. Then we'll see how European policies are adapting to try and address sustainable urban integration. But first, here are the facts. 1 in 11 Europeans lives with less than the average citizen in their country. 30% cannot afford unexpected expenses, and more than 1 in 10 of us spend 40% of our income on housing. Now, for some, that means giving up on basic needs, moving away from a city centre where jobs are, and not being able to afford to come back to work. That means creating a benefits trap and sometimes a drop in GDP growth of an urban area. So Monica Pinner decided to see what a large city like Barcelona is doing about it.
Amongst the rooftops of Barcelona, just 10,000 homes are under market prices. It means there's limited residential accommodation available for people in need of an affordable place to live.
1.5% of properties in Barcelona make up the social housing stock. This compares to 48% in Amsterdam, followed by Berlin, London and Paris.
A new left-wing-led council here in Barcelona, led by former housing activist Ada Colau, has brought in several measures to try and turn things around. They include fining banks with empty houses on their books, acquiring new properties, restoring old ones and planning 2,000 new ones. It's cost the council 29 million euros in 8 months.
The government has already spent 12 million euros on financial support to help people who can't afford to pay their rent. By doing this, the council avoids having to provide social housing.
Jorge is among 3,000 families who've received council help. He was moved to this social housing flat with his son last December, having received support to apply for it.
I lived in a basement for 7 years until I lost my job. One day they came with the eviction paper, 3 years after I stopped paying. Now I pay 20% of my income, 85 euros per month.
Jorge had help from an organisation called PAH, Platform for People Affected by Mortgage. It's got a law approved which forces banks holding empty apartments to use them as emergency accommodation for people who've been evicted. It also gives people facing eviction the right to social rent.
There are around 30 evictions a day in Barcelona, and there are 2,500 empty flats belonging to big organisations. We want those in the social housing stock.
Barcelona Council has so far gained 455 properties in the city through negotiating with banks.
What works in Barcelona isn't always practical everywhere else, and that's where a network like Eurocities comes in, bringing together the governments and mayors of 130 cities across Europe. Fanny Goré went to catch up with Joanna Roland. She is the mayor of Nantes and the president of Eurocities, and began by asking her what's the biggest challenge we face today in our urban landscape.
Le premier, c'est la question du logement. Demain,
first, it's the question of housing. Tomorrow, in Europe and around the world, cities will concentrate the population. There are some difficulties in terms of precariousness and the environment, but we also have solutions. To be efficient, European politics have to be designed with cities because they act as a lever. When there's support for a policy in terms of housing, it also supports the local economy and the local labour market.
In terms of transport, what kind of solutions would you implement?
That is the responsibility of our cities, of our big urban areas, to have a strategic view on social integration issues. When I look at Europe today, I see cities like ours where the heart and popular districts are crossed by a network of transport. It creates a bond. When I look at other places where you have the heart of the city, the ring road and popular districts further away, you can be active in terms of social politics, for example. But if the physical distance and the feeling of division and segmentation is strong, it can still be an issue.
Among all the cities you see as president of Eurocities, is there one that's a particularly good model?
Our cities are diverse. They don't have the same history. They don't have the same course. I'm looking at what Amsterdam does in terms of digital transition challenges. But I also look at what Barcelona is doing, including on the cultural question. We've also been in touch with German cities recently, including on the difficult question of refugees. When we look at what a city like Vienna does in terms of affordable housing, yes, you can see there are things we can share to be more efficient, to get solutions at a European level.
Let's add to the challenge of urban integration the arrival of newcomers, whether they're legal migrants or asylum seekers, which Europe is seeing the most of in decades, and they're mostly coming from war-torn countries like Syria, Afghanistan and Eritrea. In the short term, that's good for GDP because it bumps up domestic demand since governments have to spend on housing and healthcare for these newcomers. But in the medium to long term, the impact on GDP is really determined by the speed of integration of these folks into a flexible labour market with the skills we need. So Monica Pinno went to Vantaa in Finland to find out what they're doing to not only get native citizens and newcomers jobs, but also avoid the welfare trap.
Traditional ceremonies are not unusual in Vantaa, next to Helsinki. It has the highest percentage of residents with a migrant background in the country. Samira is one of the 30,000 or so immigrants here. She arrived from Morocco 19 years ago with a law degree. She now has 5 children and works in a refugee centre.
When I arrived in Finland, I couldn't find a Finnish course. In 1997, for refugees, it was easy, but not for me.
There's a multiculturalism programme here in Vantaa which aims to get migrants into work through education and training. The Hakunila International Society organises Finnish courses, for instance. Around 3,000 people benefited from support last year.
The issues that are in question, there are various, from how to get driving license to how to settle with the children, custody issues to how to get retirement benefits.
Suvi and Tina from the local employment agency and the municipality go to the centre several times a week.
I help people with finding jobs, applying for jobs, applying for different types of education as well.
Over 33.5 million people born outside the EU live in a member state. The number of first-time asylum applicants went up by more than 150% in the third quarter of 2015, a social, political and economic challenge.
Finland had about 3,000 asylum seekers per year, but in 2015 this number rocketed to over 32,000.
Last year, 10 times more asylum seekers arrived to Finland.
I think we are counting that about 40% of those asylum seekers would get the
permission to stay. Of course, we need much more services for the arrivals.
Europe has set up the Asylum, Migration and Integration Fund with a total of more than €3 billion to promote efficiency around migrant flows and also to bring a common approach. The UK comes out on top in terms of allocation, followed by Italy and France.
So how do cities grow and integrate when you put intrinsic and new pressures on them, whether it's legal immigration or asylum seekers? And how does policy really translate to reality on the ground? Joining us is European Commissioner for Regional Policy, Corina Crețu. Commissioner, we've talked about refugees and we've talked about integration. How do you make it reality on the ground without compromising on vulnerable native populations? And what about the money?
It's the biggest challenge that we have in the history, the biggest amount of people displaced. And as you said, we have already vulnerable people. More than 120 millions of Europeans are at the risk of poverty. And of course, we have now to integrate this new priority, which is a migration crisis. It's very important to let people know and cities know that we are now in the beginning of the new programming period. We have 450 billion euro from this policy, regional policy, which with the contribution of the member states will be 600 billion euro. And with all this money, we'd like to tackle these issues of inequalities.
The policy that trickles down from the European level to the city level, do you see any response, positive, negative?
Regardless of this politics and arguing between member states, people who are on the ground, mayors of the cities are the first one who have to take quickly actions and measures in order to tackle this migration. For the first time when there is not any reluctance on this, it's for the first time when for the next 7 years we'll give funds directly to the cities. 16 billion euros will be managed directly by the cities in what are the biggest challenges: housing, tackle with vulnerable groups. We have many examples of cities which already deal with this in Germany, for instance, in Netherlands, but other countries, they really don't know what to do, and we are here to help, to give technical assistance.
For 2016, what is going to be key for cities to focus on?
Social integration will be, from my point of view, the most important words for the next years. And new startups and also energy efficiency, housing, regeneration of deprived urban areas, creating jobs, investing in education, in health. And all these are priorities for regional policy for the next 7 years.
Commissioner, on that note, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.